George Lynch fired his newest singer, Ray West, after only 2 shows! Hey guys, welcome back to the Bald Shredder channel. So, what the heck happened? 2 shows and then he gets fired? Did they get in a fight? Did they get in an argument? Was he drunk on stage? Was the crowd booing him? I mean, what happened? Before we talk about what happened, let's back up a little bit here. Before Ray West, the singer in George Lynch's band, and in case you're not aware, he doesn't call it Lynch Mob anymore. It's called George Lynch and the Electric Freedom. Alright, so his most recent singer was Andrew Freeman. Andrew has sung in a lot of 80s bands. He's been in and out of George's band a number of times over the years, and he just kind of goes from project to project the way a lot of musicians do these days. So he's in the band with George, everything's going great, and then I guess he got an offer to be the newest singer in Great White, so he had to take that and he left George's band. So then of course, George needs a new singer, right? So he recruits a singer named Ray West, and this is what George had to say about it last month. This is from Blabbermouth. Last month, before he and West played together, Lynch was full of praise for the singer, telling VW Music, "Ray, he is just a great fit for the band. I mean, I probably couldn't have designed a better fit in a laboratory." At the time, George said that he couldn't think of any weak spots with Ray, adding that Ray was gonna bring some new life into our whole little world here. And I also read some comments that George said where he was really heaping a lot of praise on Ray and saying stuff like, yeah, I mean, he could have been Oni Logan, like when they were looking for singers for the Wicked Sensation for the first Lynch Mob lineup, he basically said he could have been the guy. He was good enough. He has got that same vibe, and on and on and on. I mean, he's just heaping all kinds of praise on Ray, talking about how great he is. So then they do 2 shows, and George kicks him out of the band. He didn't quit. He didn't leave. George let him go. How does that happen after George is saying how great he is and then they do 2 shows and he just totally bombs in the 2 shows? Well, I think, and this is what Ray had to say about it just a few days ago, they didn't have any rehearsals. So the guy joins the band and the first time he plays with the band is at the first show. They never even had a practice. How do you do that? And he said, he was honest about it. He's like, I'm not a cover singer, you know, I can't just jump in with a band, just jump on stage and know the songs perfectly. He said, I'm not super familiar with the songs, so, you know, when you don't know the songs that well, how are you gonna get up there and do a full set and sing the songs? So while I totally understand the situation and I understand why there weren't any rehearsals or practices, I do have to say, how did George really expect him to get up there and just nail it and hit it out of the park with no practices? Things are so different now than they were in the 80s. You know, bands play gigs here and there. There's no record label. There's no money support. You know, they just get paid for those gigs that they do. So, you know, if they were gonna do rehearsals or practices, George already has the gigs lined up. So there was no time for practices. And if they were to do the practices, they'd have to pay for the rehearsal space, pay for people to get there. The other band members, they probably want to be paid for practicing, but it's not the 80s anymore, you know? The money's just not there. You're playing these little club shows, and sometimes you get on some bigger shows, maybe like a festival or whatever, but for the most part it's, you know, small club shows, and the band gets a certain amount of money, and I'm sure George is keeping the majority of the money, and then he pays the other 3 guys a certain amount for playing that show. And that's just the way it is these days. And that's why Andrew Freeman had to jump on the Great White gig, because I'm sure it was more money, maybe more regular, you know, like more of a regular schedule, like more of a guarantee we're gonna play a lot more shows, maybe more shows than what George does. I don't know. It must have been a better deal for him, because these guys are always looking for their next gig, you know, because even if they're in one band, you play a few shows, and then what? And then there's downtime. Well, between gigs, between shows, they're not getting paid. They have to pay rent, they have to buy food, they gotta pay bills. What are they supposed to do? And that's another reason why George's band has just been like a revolving door of singers and drummers and bass players as well. Because they're in the band, they do a group of shows, and then they go off to do something else, and then when George is ready to go again, well, those guys are already playing with somebody else, so he's gotta find whoever's available, who's available to do these like shows in July or shows in August, and then he recruits those guys. So yeah, just, you know, Not the way it was back in the 80s when they had support from Elektra Records or whatever big label that they were on at the time. So I do feel kind of bad for Ray West that he didn't really have a chance to get his footing. Basically, that first show was a rehearsal without even really knowing the songs. But I understand George's perspective as well. He can't have the shows bombing because if the shows are bombing, it's, you're gonna get a negative reaction from the crowd, you're gonna get a negative reaction online. That's gonna affect the future shows. He doesn't really have time to go through that. So it's just kind of a bummer for everybody. Bummer for Ray, bummer for the fans, maybe that were at those two shows. Maybe not so much, because, you're going to a George Lynch show, you're there to see George Lynch, and I guess the singer's not a huge part of it, but, if I'm going to the show, I would really hope that there's a singer there that's gonna nail those songs, because it's not like George is shredding throughout the whole song. The solo's in the middle, it's not most of the song. You want those songs to sound good. So I just hope that he can get somebody that will at least stay with the band kind of for a while, and somebody that sings well. It seems like there's not a huge pool of guys out there to choose from because they end up kind of choosing the same guys over and over. It's not the 80s anymore, that's for sure. So what's gonna happen down the line? I don't know. Will Ray find his way back in the band at some point? Maybe. Will Andrew Freeman find his way back into George's band at some point? That I would bet on, because he's been in and out of George's band so many times already that I would say at some point he will sing with George again. And I'm really curious if anybody out there watching this video, were you at one of the two shows with Ray West? And was it really that bad? I'd really like to know what you guys think. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time!